Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going deep on a topic that's been making headlines lately. Rental scams.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a ton of research, news articles, even court cases.
Oh.
And our mission here is to make sure you can navigate the online rental world safely and confidently.
Well, it's interesting because this topic really touches on psychology, economics, and even technology.
Right.
I mean, scammers are getting really sophisticated in how they exploit our desires and vulnerabilities. And they take advantage of just how complex the whole digital world is.
Okay, so we're not just going to give a list of scams or red flags or whatever. We're going way deeper than that. Exploring the psychology behind how they do it and connecting it to real-world examples.
Like, for example, take the classic phantom rental listing. It really preys on that desire we all have for a good deal.
Oh, yeah.
And that feeling that you gotta act fast when you're looking for a place to live.
Right.
You know? They create these super enticing listings with photos that are either stolen or totally made up. And they price them way below market value just to lure you in.
So they're like tapping into that fear of missing out, making you think you have to jump on it right away.
Exactly. And to make that sense of urgency even stronger, they'll often make up stories about other people being interested or say they can't show you the place because they're out of town.
Oh, right. That's like that overseas landlord scam too, isn't it?
That's right.
Where they pretend to be, a landlord stuck in some other country.
Yeah.
And tug at your heartstrings.
It's like,
Maybe a military deployment or a family emergency.
and since they can't show you the property in person, they ask for a big deposit or even the first month's rent up front, wired directly to their account, of course.
Is that always a red flag? I mean, are there ever times when a landlord might ask for payment before you've even seen the place?
Well, there might be a few rare exceptions, but it's always a huge risk. I mean, think about it. Why would a landlord who has a desirable property need to go outside the normal procedures and collect money without even checking your identity or your credit? It's just not how the rental market usually works.
That's a good point. It's like they're going around all those safeguards that are supposed to protect both renters and landlords.
Exactly. Another tactic that plays on our desire for a good deal is the bait and switch. It's like they're dangling a carrot and then yanking it away.
So you find this amazing listing, it's perfect, you reach out, and then suddenly it's been rented.
Right.
But, they have another one that's not quite as good and probably more expensive.
Right, and they're hoping that you'll be disappointed enough to just jump on the next best thing without really thinking it through.
Wow.
What's really interesting is the psychology behind it. By getting you emotionally invested in that first property, even if it was fake, they've made you more likely to accept a worse option.
That's so sneaky. Like playing mind games to get what they want.
And it just highlights how important it is to stay grounded and objective in your search. Don't let your emotions make you rush into a decision without thinking about all the facts.
Okay, so we've got phantom listings, overseas landlords, bait and switch. What other sneaky tactics should we be on the lookout for?
Well, sometimes they'll use real properties, but with photos or descriptions that are misleading.
Yeah.
They're playing on our assumptions. We see a nice picture, we assume the rest of the place is the same, but the reality could be completely different.
Oh, like when they use a wide-angle lens to make a room look bigger, or they crop out the bad parts?
Right. And the descriptions can be just as misleading. They might use vague language, highlight things that aren't actually there, or downplay any problems with the property.
It's like they're creating an illusion, hiding what the place is really like.
And that's exactly why you need to see the property in person before you commit to anything.
Got it.
Don't just rely on photos and descriptions. Trust your own eyes and your gut feeling.
Okay, so never, ever hand over any money or sign a lease without seeing the place first.
Right.
Okay, got it. But what about when the scammer pretends to be the landlord of a property they don't even own? How can you protect yourself from that?
Well, that's where you need to do your homework and be a little bit skeptical. You should always verify the landlord's identity and make sure they actually own the property. Public records are your friend here. A quick search online can usually tell you if the person listing the property is the real owner or has the right to rent it out.
So don't just take their word for it.
Right.
You've got to do your research and make sure everything checks out.
Don't be afraid to ask for proof of ownership or documents that prove their identity and that they have the right to rent the property.
That's a great tip, being proactive and protecting yourself.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about protecting yourself, let's talk about red flags.
Okay.
Those are the warning signs that should set off your scam detecting radar.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my detective hat. Give me the rundown on those red flags.
Well, like we've already talked about, if a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. You know, that incredible loft in a trendy neighborhood for half the price. Yeah, that's a major red flag. Scammers know we love a bargain.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, if a price seems way off, there's usually a reason.
Okay. Common sense and knowing the market are important. What else should we watch out for?
High pressure tactics.
Yeah.
If they're pushing you to make a decision quickly without seeing the place, that's a huge red flag. A real landlord won't pressure you into making a hasty decision.
Right.
They understand renting is a big commitment, and they want you to feel good about your choice.
So if they're trying to rush you or create that sense of urgency, that's a sign to slow down and really think about it.
Exactly. And another red flag is if they ask for payment through methods that you can't trace, like wire transfers, prepaid debit cards, or gift cards. If things go wrong, you'll never get your money back.
That makes sense. Real landlords and property managers usually use secure methods like checks, bank transfers, or online platforms that offer some protection.
Right. And they'll give you a receipt or something to show you paid. If someone's pushing for shady payment methods, walk away.
Okay, so unrealistic prices, high-pressure tactics, and shady payment methods. What else should we be on the lookout for?
Well, another thing is poor communication or being evasive. If they're vague in their answers, avoid specific questions about the property, or don't want to give you contact info or proof of ownership, those are all red flags.
Yeah, a legitimate landlord would be open and honest and happy to answer your questions.
Exactly. If they're dodging your questions or giving you the runaround, something's probably up.
Okay, so we've got a good list of red flags so far, but what about if they refuse to meet in person or show you the property? Is that always a scam?
It's definitely a big red flag. While there might be some rare cases where an in-person meeting isn't possible, it's pretty standard for landlords to show the property to potential renters.
Right. It gives you a chance to see the place yourself, make sure it's in good condition, and that it meets your needs.
Exactly. And it lets you meet the landlord face-to-face, which can help you get a feel for if they're trustworthy.
Okay, so if they're avoiding meeting in person, that's a sign to be extremely careful.
Definitely. A real landlord will want you to see the property before you make any decisions.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the different types of scams, the psychology behind them, and the red flags to watch out for. Knowledge is our best defense in the online rental world.
Right. By understanding their tactics and being aware of the warning signs, you can really lower your risk of becoming a victim. But even if you're careful, it's still possible to run into a scam.
That's true. So, what happens if you think you've been scammed? What steps should you take?
First, don't panic. Act fast.
Okay.
Start by contacting your bank or credit card company right away to report the fraud and try to stop the payment or reverse the charges.
So, paying with a credit card might be safer than a wire transfer in that situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Credit card companies and banks have fraud departments that can help you get your money back.
Okay.
It's also super important to report the scam to the authorities.
Okay. Who are the authorities in this case?
Well, it depends on where you are and what kind of scam it was. In the U.S., you would want to contact the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. You could also report it to your local police or consumer protection agency.
And I'm guessing reporting it to the website or app where you found the listing is important too.
Absolutely. Platforms like Craigslist, Zillow, and Facebook Marketplace take this stuff seriously and want to get rid of fake listings to protect other users.
Right, so report, report, report. It might seem like a hassle, but it's important for trying to get your money back and stopping others from being scammed too.
Exactly. Reporting these scams helps build a case against the scammer, which can be really helpful for law enforcement and online platforms trying to stop them.
And what about protecting yourself after a scam? Are there steps you should take to keep your personal information safe?
If you've shared sensitive stuff like your social security number or bank account info, you might want to think about putting a fraud alert or credit freeze on your accounts to protect yourself from identity theft.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
These scams can have consequences that go beyond just losing money. Okay, this has been a lot of information,
It has.
but it's all been super valuable.
Definitely. We've covered a lot. But remember, knowledge is power. By understanding how scammers operate and knowing the warning signs, you can really reduce your chances of falling victim to their schemes.
Absolutely. We've laid a solid foundation for spotting those rental scams, but there's still more to uncover. When we come back, we'll dig deeper into the legal and financial stuff about renting and explore some more resources for protecting yourself from scams.
Stay with us. We've got more scam-busting advice coming up.
Welcome back. I feel like I'm a lot more prepared to spot rental scams now.
That's great. But scammers are always coming up with new tricks.
Oh, right.
So it's really important to stay informed.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What else should we be thinking about when looking for a place to rent online?
Well, we've talked about scams and all those warning signs, but let's focus on the legal and financial side of renting for a bit. This is where things can get kind of complicated.
Okay.
But understanding this stuff is really important to protect yourself and make sure everything goes smoothly.
Okay, I'm ready to learn more about renting. Let's talk legal stuff.
Okay, one of the most important things is knowing your rights as a tenant.
Okay.
Every state has laws about landlords and tenants covering things like lease agreements, security deposits, evictions, and making sure the place you're renting is safe to live in.
So it's not just a free-for-all. There are rules to protect renters.
Oh, absolutely. These laws are there to make sure both landlords and tenants are treated fairly.
Okay, so where can renters go to find out about these laws? Do I have to go to a law library?
Not necessarily. There are lots of resources online. Just search for tenant rights in your state or city. You can find info on government websites and legal aid websites.
Great tip. So once you know your rights, what's next?
Well, like we talked about, always read the lease agreement really carefully before you sign anything. This document outlines all the terms of your rental agreement, and it's legally binding. Don't let all the legal words scare you. Take your time, read it in small sections, and maybe have someone you trust look it over with you.
Right, because once you sign, you have to follow what it says.
Exactly. And it's not just about understanding the legal stuff, it's also about protecting yourself from scams or situations that aren't fair. There are some things in a lease that might be a red flag.
Okay, like what kind of red flag should we be looking for?
First, make sure the lease clearly says who the landlord or property manager is and how to contact them. If it's vague or you can't verify who they are, that's a red flag.
Makes sense. You need to know who you're dealing with and how to reach them if you need to. What else?
Pay really close attention to the part about the security deposit.
Oh.
The lease should say how much it is, when they can keep it, and how you get it back when you move out.
Right. Those security deposit scams can be tricky. Landlords might try to say there's damage to keep your money, even if you left the place in good shape.
Exactly. When you move in and out, take pictures and keep records of everything, especially any conversations you have with the landlord about the security deposit.
Okay, so clear landlord info and detailed security deposit terms. Got it. Any other red flags in the lease agreement we should be aware of?
Yeah, be careful about any weird or unfair rules that seem to give the landlord way too much power.
Okay.
For example, watch out for things that let them enter your place without notice or put a lot of restrictions on how you can use it.
Like if they can just come in whenever they want or say you can't have guests over.
Right. A lease is supposed to be fair to both sides. If there are any rules that seem strange or make you uncomfortable, ask for an explanation or talk to a lawyer.
Okay, so if I'm not sure, get a second opinion. Good advice. We've covered the legal side of things. Now let's talk about the financial part of renting. What are some key things to think about financially, especially to avoid scams and protect my money?
One of the most important things is to figure out how much you can actually afford to spend on rent each month. Look at all your other expenses like utilities, groceries, transportation, and any debts you have.
Right, because renting that awesome penthouse with the rooftop hot tub won't be so fun if I can't afford to buy food or pay my other bills.
Exactly. You have to be realistic about your finances and not try to spend more than you can afford.
Okay, so budget is super important. What else should I be thinking about from a financial perspective?
Well, like we said earlier, be careful about upfront payments. Real landlords usually only ask for a security deposit and maybe the first month's rent after you've been approved and signed the lease.
And those payments should always be made through secure and traceable methods, right?
Absolutely. Never pay with cash, wire transfers, prepaid cards, or gift cards. If something goes wrong, there's no way to get your money back.
Okay, budget, secure payments, anything else?
You should really consider getting renter's insurance.
All right.
It might not be required everywhere, but it's a good idea. It protects your things in case of theft, fire, or damage, and it covers you if someone gets hurt in your place.
Right. Even if you avoid scams, accidents can happen, and it's good to have that extra protection.
Exactly. Renter's insurance is pretty affordable and gives you peace of mind.
Okay, so renter's insurance is a smart move. Now, going back to scams, we've talked about how to spot them and protect ourselves. But what are some other things we can do to check if a rental listing or a landlord is legitimate?
Have you ever heard of the Better Business Bureau?
I think so, yeah.
You can check their website for reviews and ratings of landlords and property management companies.
So, like a Yelp for landlords.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
The BBB can help you find businesses that have a lot of complaints or are known for shady practices.
Hmm.
It's not perfect, but it's a good place to start.
Okay, so checking the BBB is a good first step. What other strategies can we use?
Well, remember we talked about those misleading photos. You can actually do a reverse image search online.
Oh, right.
That can tell you if the photos were stolen from another website or if the property isn't what they're saying it is.
That's so smart. Using technology to fight back against scammers.
Exactly. And don't forget about social media. Search for the landlord or property manager on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Look for any red flags, like if they don't have a real business page or their posts seem off.
Right, because a real business would have a professional online presence and interact with people in a good way.
Exactly. And while you're online, see if you can find any reviews or discussions about the landlord or the property. Sometimes past tenants share their experiences, good or bad, which can be super helpful.
Okay, so BBB, reverse image search, social media checks, and online reviews. Got it. Any other resources or strategies we should know about?
Here's one that's kind of old school, but it can really work. Talk to neighbors.
Really?
If you can go see the property, try to chat with people who live nearby.
Like just knock on their door and be like, hey, do you know anything about the landlord here?
Well, maybe not that directly. You could say something like, I'm thinking about renting in this neighborhood. Do you have any advice?
Right, a little more subtle.
People who live there might have info about the property or the landlord that you won't find online.
Yeah, they might know if there have been problems with the landlord or the building before,
Mhm.
or just things about the neighborhood that you should be aware of.
Exactly. Local knowledge can be really helpful.
Okay, that's a great tip. It's all about gathering as much info as you can before making a decision.
Exactly. Renting is a big commitment, both financially and in terms of your life.
Right.
It's worth taking the time to do your research and make sure you're making a safe and informed choice.
Right. Better safe than sorry. So we've talked about the different types of scams, the red flags, how to find safe rentals, legal and financial stuff, and how to verify everything. I feel like I'm starting to get a better understanding of this whole process.
That's great. It's all about recognizing the patterns and being able to spot potential problems.
Right. But even if I'm careful, it's still possible to miss something, isn't it? Scammers are always getting better, and it's tough to find a place to rent.
That's true. That's why you have to trust your gut. If something feels wrong, if a deal is too good to be true, or if the landlord seems shady, walk away.
Right. It's better to miss out on a place than to get stuck in a bad situation.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are people and organizations that can help you navigate the rental process. You can contact tenant groups, legal aid, or even just ask friends or family who have rented before.
Okay, that's good to know. It's like having a support system to help me make good decisions and avoid problems.
Right. And the more you learn and experience you get, the more confident you'll become.
Uh-huh.
It's all a learning process, but it will help you find a safe and comfortable home.
Okay, so we've covered the practical stuff, legal stuff, financial stuff, and how important it is to trust my gut feeling. But before we move on to our final thoughts, there's something I've been wondering about during this whole discussion.
Oh, what's that?
Well, we've been talking about how to protect ourselves from scams.
Right.
But what about the bigger issues that make these scams so common in the first place?
That's a really good point. We can't just focus on fixing the symptoms.
Right.
We need to address the root of the problem. And one of the biggest factors is that there just isn't enough affordable housing in a lot of places.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. When people are desperate for a place to live, they're more likely to believe those scams that offer amazing deals that are actually too good to be true.
Exactly. That desperation can make people ignore warning signs and take risks they normally wouldn't.
So it's like these scammers are taking advantage of a real problem that a lot of people are facing.
Exactly. And it's not just about affordability, it's also about the lack of transparency and accountability in the rental market. There's often a power imbalance between landlords and tenants,
Right.
and that can lead to people getting taken advantage of.
Especially when a lot of renters don't know their rights or can't fight back against unfair practices.
Exactly. That's why we need to advocate for change. We need stronger laws to protect tenants, more affordable housing options, and more transparency in the rental process.
Okay, so it's not just about individuals being careful.
Right.
It's also about working together to fix the system.
Exactly. We need to work together to create a rental market that is fair, safe, and works for everyone.
That's a powerful thought. It reminds me that we all have a part to play in making things better. But for now, let's focus back on individuals and talk about some proactive things we can do to find safe and legitimate rentals online. Because let's be real, the internet is going to be a major way people find places to live for a long time.
You're right. The key is to use those online resources carefully and strategically.
Okay.
And always be a little bit skeptical.
Okay, I'm ready for some proactive tips. What should we do?
First, always stick to well-known, reputable websites like Zillow, Realtor.com, or Apartments.com. These sites usually have better ways of checking listings and landlords.
Okay.
And they offer some protection for renters.
Right. They want to keep their good reputation, so they're more likely to do something about fake listings or bad landlords.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to do some extra research.
Okay.
If you see a listing you like, Google the address, make sure it matches the website, and use Google Street View to check out the neighborhood.
So it's like being an internet detective.
Right.
I like it.
And like we talked about before, you can use online property records to see who owns the property. These records can tell you about the history of the property, who's owned it, and if there are any problems with it.
Great tips. Reading reviews is also a good idea, right?
Definitely. If the website has reviews for landlords or property managers, read through them carefully. Look for any patterns in what people are saying. Good reviews can make you feel more confident, and bad reviews could be a warning sign.
Okay, so use good websites, do your own research, and check reviews. Got it. Anything else?
Communication is really important. When you contact a landlord or property manager, pay attention to how they communicate. Are they quick to respond, professional, and do they answer your questions? Or do they seem evasive or like they're hiding something?
Right. If they're pushy or their answers sound rehearsed or fake, that's a bad sign.
Exactly. And always, always see the property in person before you sign or pay anything. No matter what excuses they give you, a real landlord will want you to see it.
No excuses allowed.
Right. There's no good reason why a real landlord wouldn't want you to see the place.
Okay, so we've talked about using reputable websites, doing my research, checking reviews, communicating effectively, and always seeing the property in person. Any other tips for staying safe when renting online?
One thing people forget is to be careful about sharing personal information.
Right.
Don't give out sensitive stuff like your social security number or bank info until you're absolutely sure you're dealing with a legitimate landlord and you're ready to apply.
Right. Protect yourself from identity theft. And of course, always read the lease agreement really carefully before you sign it.
Absolutely. Make sure you understand everything it says, like the rent amount, the security deposit, how long the lease is, and any other important details.
Okay, this has been super helpful.
Yeah.
I feel much more prepared to find a safe rental online.
Good.
But there's still more to talk about. When we come back, we'll look at this issue from a broader perspective and leave you with some final thoughts to think about as you continue your rental journey.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive into rental scams. We've talked about so much, from those common scams to what your rights are as a renter. We even got into using online tools to see if a landlord's the real deal.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. But like you said before, we need to zoom out a little and see the bigger picture here.
Right. We've been focused on what we can do as individuals, but what about the things that make these scams so common in the first place?
Well, one big factor is the lack of affordable housing in many areas.
Yeah. When people are desperate for a place to live, they can fall victim to those scams that promise the impossible.
Right.
That desperation can make them miss those red flags.
It's like those scammers are taking advantage of a serious problem.
Exactly. And more people are using online platforms to find housing.
Right.
That's convenient.
Right.
But it also gives scammers a way to hide and reach more people.
It's a double-edged sword. And then there's the problem of actually catching those scammers.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially when they're operating across state lines or even internationally.
Right. It's tough. To really address rental scams, we need a multi-pronged approach,
Okay.
Stronger protections for tenants, more affordable housing, more transparency in the process.
Right.
We also need better security measures on those online platforms and more effective law enforcement to hold them accountable.
So it's not just about individuals being cautious, it's about changing the system too.
Exactly. We need to push for policies that make renting fairer and safer for everyone. Okay, so for our final thoughts, what's the most important thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I think it comes down to this. The more you know about rental scams, the better you can protect yourself.
Right.
Stay informed, be careful, and trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is.
And remember, even if you're super careful, Anyone can be a target. Don't be afraid to ask for help if you're unsure about something. Talk to tenant advocacy groups, legal aid organizations, or even friends and family who have experience renting.
That's so important. Having a good support system can really help, especially when you're trying to navigate the rental market.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a feeling of empowerment. You have the knowledge and the tools to protect yourself from rental scams.
Yes, you do.
And by working together and sharing what we've learned, we can help protect each other from these shady schemes.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay safe out there in the digital world.